Hey guys, so we are wrapping up our series on the book of Colossians today. This is our last video. Colossians is only 4 chapters long and you're on video number 4. So here we go. We're going to be done. So let me remind you for the last time a little background on the book of Colossians. So there was a guy named Epaphras, and he is from a city called Colossae. And he went on a journey. On that journey, he heard the gospel of Jesus. He heard about Jesus from a guy named Paul. And he took that message home with him, told his friends and his family, and started a church there in Colossae. And so there is a community of believers there trying to live for Jesus and trying to live out their faith. But there's a lot of pressures on the outside trying to tell them to do it differently. So Epaphras is really worried about his friends and his family and their faith. So he goes on another journey to find Paul, and he finds Paul in a Roman prison, and he tells Paul what's been going on. And Paul is so worried for him that he writes this letter to the Colossian Christians to kind of help them resist the pressures and to resist their temptations. And that is the letter that we read when we read the book of Colossians. So the first video we looked at the first chapter of Colossians, where we talked about the best way to know the truth about Jesus is to read about him, and the best place to read about him is the Gospels. So I challenge you to start reading the Gospels and read the Gospel of Matthew specifically. In the second video, we looked at the second chapter of Colossians, and I talked to you about how important it is to know the truth of the Gospel so you can correct those that try to correct you incorrectly. And I challenge you again to keep reading the Gospel of Matthew. In our last video, video number 3, we looked at the third chapter of Colossians. And in that chapter, Paul very practically laid out how to live like Christians instead of like the people we were before, right? We all did bad things before. We led sinful lives. But this is what it looks like to try to live your life for Jesus and to imitate him. And he talked about people will know you're a Christian by how you act. You need to act like Jesus. So today, since we're going to be wrapping up chapter 4 of Colossians, I want you all to pause this video, get your Bibles. If you haven't read anything of Colossians, read the whole thing. If you have, then just read chapter 4 and then unpause me and we will keep watching. Or keep watching. We'll keep going. All right, so in Colossians chapter 4, Paul is wrapping up of how Christians should live as a household of believers. First, that's how it starts in chapter 4. Then he tells them to keep on praying, to be persistent and consistent in their prayers. And he also tells them to treat non-Christians well. And he wraps up the letter with greetings from people, for people they know, greeting people on his behalf. And he wraps up a final thought by writing a greeting in his own hand. In case you don't know this, Paul probably used, he dictated the letter and someone else wrote it. But at the very end, he wrote his own signature for people. So let's go to the beginning of chapter 4 and look at verse 2. Chapter 4, verse 2. Paul says, "Devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful." So we see here Paul is reminding the Colossians to pray. Devote themselves to prayer. That means that they, and you and I can also apply this to our lives, should pray a lot. Devote yourselves to pray. Think about when you're devoted to something, how much time you give to it. That's the amount of prayer they should be doing. They should be devoted to prayer, giving it lots of time. And in those prayers, they should be watchful of those who will try to lead them astray and be grateful for what Jesus has done for them and what he has given them. They should be grateful in those prayers, talking about how much they love Jesus. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for dying on the cross for me. Thank you for making me a part of God's family. Be grateful in those prayers, devoted and grateful in prayer. Verse 5, he says, "Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly..." I'm reading chapter 4, verse 5. "Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity." Okay, we need to treat non-Christians well. You can't go out and treat people terribly unless they're a Christian. You need to treat people well. you need to also be wise, okay? You can't just let people tell you whatever they want and believe them. That's what we've been talking about. You need to know the truth, so when people try to lead you away from Jesus, you can say, that's not the truth, this is the truth, and they won't lead you astray. And you need to be willing to tell them the truth, okay? You need to treat them with kindness, but don't be led astray, and also be able and ready to tell them, this is the truth, this is the gospel. It's not what you're saying, it is this. You need to know the truth about Jesus, the gospel, salvation, all of it. Be willing and ready to make the most of every opportunity to talk about your faith. Be ready to tell what Jesus has done for you. Be ready to tell how your life is different. What's it like being a part of the family of God? What was it like before that? What's it like now? And be able to tell them how they can also get to know Jesus and have a relationship with him, so that they can receive the truth and have salvation. Verse 6, he goes on and he says, let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Paul says to be gracious to other people. That means to be kind to them. Don't be mean. Don't be negative all the time. We should treat people the way Jesus would treat them. And Jesus wouldn't treat them that way, you guys. We need to be kind towards them. We need to be compassionate. We need to be willing to answer their questions with kindness and gentleness, but still with truth and honesty. And refute people when they try and tell it wrong. Know the truth from the Bible and be able to tell it to people with kindness and grace and love. That's what Paul told the Colossians, and that's what he's telling us today. So the first two chapters talked about who Jesus is and the truth of the gospel. The third chapter talked practically about how to live out and show the love of Jesus. And the last chapter here is a reminder that even though these people are trying to lead them astray, they should be treated with kindness and respect, but be ready to correct them with the truth of Jesus and his love. So my bottom line for you guys today is this. Even people who are wrong or believe differently than you should be treated with kindness and taught the truth. Even people who are wrong or believe differently than you should be treated with kindness and taught the truth. We all know people who will try to tell us we are wrong and that we believe the wrong things. They will try to lead us astray and distract us from the truth. But they should still be treated with kindness, you guys. Even Jesus was kind to people. Even when he had to tell them hard truth, he was honest, but he was never just mean and malicious. Be wise. Don't spend too much time with people if they keep trying to lead you away from God. So that doesn't mean like, oh, I have to be kind to them. That means I have to be their friend. No, if they're constantly trying to pull you away from God and pull you into bad things, you don't have to be their friend. You do have to treat them kindly. And those are not the same thing. So that doesn't mean you can be rude to them or mean to them unless they're consistently trying to pull you away. And you have to get maybe assertive or aggressive to say, no, I won't go with you. But don't be rude to them. Treat them with love and kindness and share Jesus with them. Be ready to tell the truth about Jesus to everyone. Remember, even people who are wrong or believe differently than you should be treated with kindness and taught the truth. So, how does this apply to our lives? Well, you can't tell the truth if you don't know the truth. You can't tell the truth if you don't know the truth. So, when I was 17 and a freshman in college, I didn't know a lot about God. I was a Christian. I knew what was right and wrong, but I didn't know a lot about God. And I took this class. It was class on the Old Testament of all classes. And I had to read this book, and the book was called Knowledge of the Holy by a man named A.W. Tozer. And I read this book, and this book taught me so much truth about God. I learned so much about who God really is and how much he cares for people and loves people and how much he cares and loves for me that it changed my view of God. I didn't know much truth before that, but I definitely knew truth after that of who God is and what he wants out of his people. So the best way for you to know the truth and be able to tell people about it is by reading the Bible. Learn about Jesus, and then you can tell other people about him. The challenge for this series has been to read the Gospel of Matthew. And that is still my challenge for you today. Okay, read the Gospel of Matthew. 28 chapters. You can read a chapter a day and be done in 28 days. If you want to know the truth of Jesus and how he lived, so you can live like him and tell others about him, you need to read about him in the Bible, in the books about Jesus, which are the 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I recommend you read Matthew. It's the best one to start with, okay? So read the Gospel of Matthew. That'll help you know the truth. So when people come to try to tell you a different truth, you can tell them that's not the truth. That's not real. And you can do it with kindness and respect like Jesus. Email me if you have any questions as you read through the Bible. You can also find me on the YouVersion Bible app, and we can read it together. Anything like that. I would love that, guys. Okay, so I love you all so much, and until we meet again, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face toward you and give you peace. Amen. Bye, guys.